Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. Ladies and gentlemen, I follow a lot of different chart analysts, and none of them have flipped bearish as a result of this price action, this negative price action that we've been seeing over the last few days. And now they're less likely to do so, at least based on what we've seen since Wednesday. I mean, look, here's the top 10 coins by market cap. XRP, by the way, again, the top performer here, up a 3.5%. The rest of the top 10 up around 1% to 2%, basically. A couple are flat. And it was interesting because I was looking at this, I don't know if it was maybe 8 or so hours ago. And there was a time when XRP for the 24-hour period, it was up like 12%. And there are some coins that were up more like 3% or so. XRP it continues to show ridiculous strength. And that's why I'm not surprised that one popular chart analyst I follow said that XRP is holding, and I quote, like a boss. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice. And you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. As I record this video, it's 1:55 a.m. Central Time, so it is now Thursday, November 6th, 2025. XRP is $2.32 with a 24-hour high of $2.39. And just to be clear here, the other day, XRP, according to Live Coin Watch, dropped as low as $2.09. And I know it went a little lower depending on what exchange you were looking at. That means that XRP, in like 0 seconds flat, increased in price by 30 cents in roughly a day. It increased by 30 cents. Now, for someone like me that's been holding XRP since late 2017, almost 8 years now, that is mind-blowing because 30 cents, which again just happened in about a day, that's the entirety of what XRP has been worth. I mean, honestly, almost the whole time I've been holding XRP. Most of the time, XRP is probably about 30 cents, sometimes a little bit less than that, sometimes a little bit more than that. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if over most of the last 8 years at least before it rocketed in November of last year, yeah, it was probably most of the time around 30 cents. And so to see that it did that move in a day, I was like, yes, that is the type of action I always believed was possible for XRP. And eventually, let enough time pass. I'll not be surprised to see days where XRP goes up by $1 or a number of dollars. Eventually we'll get to that norm because XRP is obviously an early winner of the crypto space. Doesn't mean that the market can't go lower. I mean, admittedly, this isn't disputed. Crypto, broadly speaking, is highly volatile. It's the most volatile asset class on the entire freaking planet. But admittedly, yeah, as a result of this and the environment that we're in right now, and there is some level of uncertainty, it's possible the market could go a little bit lower. I just refuse to believe that the bull market's over for tons of reasons. And like I said at the outset of the video, based on this most recent price action, none of the analysts that I follow have flipped bearish. None of them have flipped. And so take a look at this post from Swissblock. They shared this through their Bitcoin Vector account on X. And they wrote here, a question for the bears. How can there be a true trend shift into a bear market if profit taking hasn't been intense and even realized losses remain moderate? If that's the case, we'd be witnessing an unprecedented transition, a supposed bear market without distribution or significant capitulation from strong hands. Yeah, and that's a very good point. And you shouldn't be surprised to see a post like this. I mean, just form whatever your perspective is, use logic, reason, and data. Look at historic precedent. Just a day or two ago, I noted that Bitcoin, even though it fell down to whatever it was, around $98,000, $99,000, from its all-time high, that's only a 21% decrease. That's nothing historically speaking. Falls like that have happened multiple times during the course of bull markets in the past. So that is not enough evidence for me to think that we're in a bear market. Going down that much is actually normal. You're going to need to do a better job selling me if you want me to buy that. Okay, I'm just saying. Here's a post. This is another one from Swissblock. It's through their Altcoin Vector account. And of course, Swissblock is a fantastic on-chain analytics firm here, and it's important to track what's happening with Bitcoin, even if you're like me and you care about XRP and your altcoins way, way, way more, because Bitcoin leads the market. So you do want Bitcoin to thrive here, because the higher it goes, the better it is for XRP and everything else, because profit will be taken from Bitcoin en masse at some point as you reach the peak of the cycle, and then rotate into altcoins like XRP, and then it just drives them even higher. But here's what they said. Bitcoin enters a full compression phase where a bottom could begin to form, but it must not close below the red line, EMA 55, around $97,500 to $99,000. So if it's holding above that, and at least it is at the time I'm recording this, I mean, the price of Bitcoin is $103,241. 24-hour high for Bitcoin, $104,426. So, and that did instill some confidence in people. It's just so fascinating, though, like just the psychology between, the regular lemming retail speculators. It's just directionally whatever's happening, especially if it's happening with a lot of force. So quick moves to the downside or the upside, whatever the direction is, the typical lemming retail speculator feels emotions in accordance with that, even though those individual moves are not proof in and of themselves as to whether or not an asset will be long-term viable. That is not an indicator of that. That's just normal volatility. But still people are like, oh my God, maybe I was wrong about this thing. I bought a panic now. I don't even know what to do with my hands now. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, shut up, because none of what you're saying makes sense, and I actually don't want to hear what comes out of your face hole. That's what I think anyway. You gotta have, if you don't know why you're here, I mean, yeah, then I can understand why you're panic selling, but have some freaking conviction. Don't let your emotions overtake you. If you believe in what you believe, then isn't that something? I mean, you do whatever you want. I mean, and sometimes people have to sell for unrelated reasons. I get it. Unexpected expenses, so on and so forth. But if you're panic selling, that's a very different thing. So we'll see here, but I am not convinced that we're in a bear market. It would take a lot more. And if there's good reason to believe that, then I'll flip. But I need to see that. I need to see the good reason. I need to see that data. And just showing me a bunch of charts, if you're a chart guy out there, that's not going to be enough. I need you to factor in what actually drives a market, which means you must acknowledge macro elements. You have to talk about those metrics. If you look at just charts in a vacuum, you are depriving yourself of crucial information that absolutely should be used to come to a determination about what is most probable. So anybody that is only arguing, the charts say this, I'm like, okay, well, that's just not compelling me. Thanks for what you have to say, but that's just not enough to sway me. Here's a post from on-chain analytics firm Glassnode. Defending $100,000 Bitcoin. Bitcoin stabilizes near $100,000 after losing key cost basis level. And they just go on a note here that they think that Bitcoin's oversold at this point. Now, it doesn't mean you can't go lower. It's the same thing is true, once you get into overbought territory. Just because you're in overbought territory doesn't mean the moment that metric flips and that lights up, it doesn't mean that an asset can't keep running. In fact, a lot of the time when you get into overbought territory, you can ride that momentum for quite a while, and you can become even more tremendously overbought. Well, same thing with oversold. So even if we're oversold right now, that in and of itself doesn't guarantee there's a bottom, but it does mean you're probably getting closer. I mean, unless you guys actually believe we're going to have some crazy catastrophic, 60 to 70% drawdown, 80% drawdown for Bitcoin, even though we didn't see a final parabolic push. And then what's that mean for the rest of the market? Are all the altcoins going to go down 80%, even though they didn't have those 1,000% gains? I just don't see, to me, it doesn't make logical sense that you'd see that type of bear market fall, especially for altcoins, when you didn't have the overheating in the market to justify such a fall in the first place. If the market gets way overheated, you get out over your skis, and the market participants figure that out, and then the market corrects for that. But if you didn't have that event in the first place, what are you correcting for? Literally nothing. So you can still go down to a degree, but if you're talking about that, I'm just like... And that's why, even if we were entering a bear market, which again, I do not think we are, could be wrong, but I just don't think we are. It would be the tamest bear market in history, and bear markets don't last that long. It's a very small percentage of the time that Bitcoin has existed and the crypto asset class has existed that we've been in a crypto bear market. I'm just not afraid of it regardless. Here's a post from chart analyst Willy Woo. He's been in crypto practically since the beginning. He's one of the more famous analyst out there, 1.2 million followers on X. And just a little bit ago, so this is what, a little less than 6 hours ago, 8:11 p.m. Central, he said, he's referencing Bitcoin, of course, liquidity behind Bitcoin starting to make a recovery. See leading signal, dotted line. So you have to look at the screen if you want to see what he's talking about. He says, if this recovery continues, typically price confirms approximately 2 weeks later. Okay, so not only does he not think that we're in a bear market and that we don't have that evidence, he's like, based on historic precedent and what you're seeing with this metric, if this continues anyway, inside of a couple of weeks, it's just you're gonna see some movement. So is the bottom in here? Increasingly, I'm seeing analysts think that the sell-off that we had the other day probably marked the bottom. But look, if the analysts that I follow are wrong, they're wrong. And I've said before, if they start flipping bearish, I'm gonna highlight that. I'm like, guys, I'm actually starting to get concerned. These analysts who don't just go with the herd, even they're now flipping bearish. And if that comes to pass, I'll say that, but that's not the case now. Here's a post from the great Matsby, one of the many XRP chart analysts I follow, who accurately called XRP breaking out this market cycle. He certainly was correct. And here he shared this Bitcoin post, and he said, looks like the bears were right after all. Time for Bitcoin to rip. And of course, this is an inverted chart, so he's having a little fun, tee-hee, as if the price of Bitcoin's going down, but he inverted it, so the lower this chart goes, the higher the price of Bitcoin. But anyway, so I just want to highlight that that's another analyst who has got a pretty damn good track record. He's like, yeah, we're just going to go higher. Here's a post from Charting Guy, another guy who accurately called XRP breaking out, by the way. Here he's talking about Bitcoin, and he said, bull market remains intact whether you bears believe it or not. And so technically he may be speaking more broadly about crypto, but this is a Bitcoin chart on the screen. Maybe he did just mean Bitcoin. Either way, that's fantastic because alts follow. But here's another analyst who's like, yeah, well, here the bull market's intact. Doesn't matter what you bears think. So this has not spooked him. Here's a post from chart analyst Matthew Hyland. He says, Bitcoin is in an uptrend. Bitcoin dominance is in a downtrend. The favorable outcome is both trends continue. Yeah, and you'd love to see that. So even though Bitcoin's come down, if you look at the overall trend, if you zoom out on a chart, he's correct. It has been trending upward. He doesn't think that's over. Now, Bitcoin dominance, thankfully, that's a different story. Because that's what you want to see is Bitcoin dominance ultimately tank. And the chart structure he's seeing there means that, yeah, it's almost certainly going to continue tanking. And I'm paraphrasing there, but that's in line with the ideas he's been sharing. So yeah, Bitcoin dominance goes down. That means altcoin dominance is going up. And that's when you get an alt season. So this is all still in play so far as he's concerned. So I'm just giving you a bunch of examples. Like these analysts that I have chosen to follow, they just happen to be right. They were right. The ones that chart XRP, they were right about it ripping this cycle. Also, they were right about Bitcoin bottoming in, when did it bottom? I guess it was January 2023. Because, yeah, so the way that I was trying to remember is I think, okay, well, when did FTX happen? Right, that was November 2022. So then Bitcoin bottomed either December or I think it was January 2023. But it bottomed around $16,000. The analysts that I follow were like, no, guys, this is the bottom and we're reversing now, actually. That's what's happening. And that was not a popular sentiment. Most analysts that exist were screaming, no, we're in a bear market, and this is going to go even lower. Bitcoin's going to $12,000. But the analysts that I follow were not saying that. So I'm just saying, it doesn't mean that they're right about everything, but they've been right on the whole about the things that matter most. And so if they're all wrong here, okay, fine. But again, until I see them flip, I'm just going to be like, I doubt it. And that's not the only reason, of course. There are tons of other reasons I keep consistently citing as the days, weeks, and months pass. I just don't think this time is different. Here's a post from chart analyst. Oops, I almost passed this one. Okay. Chart analyst Mustache. This is he's highlighting altcoins here, and he says, and now we can look forward to an astronomical pump for the remainder of Q4 and Q1 of 2026. So he thinks that this bull market's going into next year. That's a popular opinion now. Look at that. It says bullish 1.5-year pattern in the making. It hasn't been easy so far, but what is coming will amaze many soon. Alt season. And so as far as he's concerned, that absolutely is still in the cards. Now let's talk about XRP the rest of the video. Here's a post from chart analyst Crypto Wizard. It says XRP closed strongly bullish today along with XRP BTC. we should see more positive sentiment from XRP. So at the moment, looking good. And by the way, he's not the only one that was talking about the XRP BTC chart. Crypto Insight UK highlighted the XRP BTC chart, which is what's on your screen right now. And he simply wrote, XRP BTC holding range lows like a boss at the moment. So he's thinking that XRP is actually sitting looking pretty damn good. And this is, it's what I keep seeing from the analysts that I follow. It's very difficult to, it's kind of interesting, even in recent days, it's been very difficult to find negative sentiment specifically for XRP. You can find all sorts of negative stuff about the market on the whole. But there's, if you look like over the last 24 to 36, maybe closer to 48 hours, I'm not seeing like a bunch of irrational XRP bashing, like even from the people who irrationally hate XRP. I'm not seeing that. And I'm not seeing any serious additional downward price expectations for XRP. There are some analysts I follow who think in the short term, it could go a little bit lower, so could Bitcoin. So, and I've shared those types of posts over the last couple of days, and some of those people are still thinking basically the same thing. But outside of that, I'm not seeing any sort of like catastrophic stuff from here. I'm really not from the analysts I follow. Here's another one from Crypto Insight UK. He says, interestingly, Ethereum and XRP look very different to Bitcoin. The difficult part is if Bitcoin takes the remainder of its liquidity, does it bring alts with it? These charts suggest it doesn't need to. Ethereum has taken all of its low time frame liquidity. It even grabbed the majority of its high time frame liquidity too. There is a tiny bit below the wick, as you can see on the daily, but it's nothing compared to what is above us. I wouldn't be overly surprised if Ethereum bottomed yesterday. Interesting, and that would be nice to see. And check this out, though. He says, similarly, XRP took all the low time frame liquidity. He says, again, there is a minuscule amount left below us in comparison to what is above. Time to be bidding / dollar cost averaging from here if you think we have more bull cycle to come, I think. And so he does seem to think that we're still in a bull cycle, quite obviously. And he's just noting, like, right now, there's not a ton of people left to sell below. Like, there just isn't. Which is why he's saying if you're the type that's bullish here, that's why his opinion is that it might make sense to start bidding on some XRP, dollar cost averaging, and purchasing XRP. He does not think this is over. He thinks the best is yet ahead, very obviously. Here's a post from chart analyst Ether Nason. He says, XRP Wyckoff method scenario repeating. And it's fascinating. So you can see what he's highlighting here. This is the chart playing out since like roughly summer of last year. He's noted that there's accumulation area. Then, of course, we ultimately broke out. And then we've been, we accumulated for a good half year. And then XRP had another all-time high in July. But we've still been, like, you can say range bound since January, basically. Even though there had been multiple all-time highs in that time period. But it's just an accumulation area. He's still fully expecting we're going to rip to the top. And what he's noting here is kind of interesting because he's noting, like, this is just a Wyckoff a schematic here, Wyckoff method scenario. And so that's what's happened last cycle and the cycle before that. It's XRP. It was moving sideways, then it rocketed, then it moved sideways, and then it had a final rocket to the upside. And he's just pointing out, like, yeah, that's a thing that just happens in chart. It's not unique to XRP, even that, like the formation itself. Behaviorally, you can talk about difference between how XRP compares to other cryptocurrencies and what type of chart is likely to play out. I'm just saying that XRP is not the first asset in history to form a chart that looks something like this. And so you can see he's just highlighting the party's not over for XRP, and this is a normal thing. And I would argue, obviously, it's a normal from a historical perspective, but he's saying here, obviously, even just from a traditional chart perspective, you see these things play out. It's just you move up, accumulation, then you move up some more, and then you get into the distribution area, that's the sell area. When you see distribution, that means the selling area. Then there's this post from Chartner, and he said, weekly stochastic RSI is resetting. Break descending resistance to get things moving. So XRP's weekly stochastic RSI has fully reset into oversold territory. And historically, It's a strong prep signal for major moves, but of course, nothing actually accelerates until price breaks through the descending resistance overhead. That's the point that he's making right here. But yeah, oversold territory. Here's a post from Mikey Bull Crypto. He says, the cycle will be interesting if the cycle peak sets in. Meanwhile, Ethereum and other alts like Solana and XRP didn't experience price discovery. It will be a serious subject of study. Yeah, so he's obviously skeptical of that. The idea that, okay, so we're actually entering a bear market, but altcoins didn't go. Try and explain that one. And that's one of the many reasons I keep saying, no, we're not in a bear market. Humans are not going to stop behaving like humans. Which is to say, when they do want to take profit from Bitcoin in mass, it's not like they're not going to be interested in, being greedy sons of bitches and taking that profit and rolling it into other stuff that hasn't rocketed ridiculously to the upside for a final parabolic push. That doesn't make any sense. Why is that human behavior now gone? Well, I don't think it is. I think it just hasn't happened yet. Now, Frecky responded to this, and so he's been in crypto since 2011, and he actually does have a career in finance. He's been in finance for some number of decades now. It's what he does on a daily basis. He's very well informed. And so, again, question is, so if this is the cycle peak, why isn't XRP going and those other coins? It would be a serious subject of study. And Frankie said it won't leg liquidity. So he's saying that won't be the case. It's just that crypto lags liquidity. So as liquidity rockets, there's a certain lag time and then alts go. And that is true. That's just factually correct. That's not an opinion. He says it will go higher time frame. So it just means big picture. Yeah, XRP is going higher. Here's a post from Chart Nerd. He says XRP $2.70 is the resistance to break before any real excitement. So that's a key level to watch in his estimation. And then there's this post from Chart Analyst CW. He's noting that there is a sell wall that exists for XRP at $2.55. So you got to chew through that also. Then there's also this post from Chart Analyst Javon Marks. And he said $5.76 to $9.73 can be next for XRP. So he's still looking at double-digit price action for XRP just about. He hasn't changed his perspective. Just to be clear, he's actually talking about more so in the short term here, obviously. He thinks XRP is going to go way, way, way higher. He's definitely an XRP bull here. So everybody's entitled to their own perspective. So am I. I just don't think this is done. I really don't. Doesn't mean we can't go lower first, but it would take a lot more for me to be convinced that we're just done going up for like the next several years, which would be the historical norm if we're entering a bear market. Or I mean, you can start to, during part of that time period, start to climb out, but for the real fun excitement, it would be like several years away if history rhymes. I doubt it, folks. I really, and if that's the case, fine. Then, I mean, I could be wrong. I'm a human, but it won't change what I'm doing. All I'm going to do is just keep holding my coins, and I'll buy more when there's pretty reasonable opportunities as price levels entice me sufficiently if they go down enough. Like, mind you, it's so funny. Like, a lot of people, when the price goes down, it makes them more likely to sell. It makes me way less likely to sell. In fact, it makes me way more likely to buy because stuff goes on sale. And I am super long-term. Nobody's going to be more impatient than me when it comes to investing in crypto. That's my mission. Okay. That's my mission in life when it comes to investing, to be more stubborn and patient than everyone else, because that's how you actually win. But yeah, XRP holding like a boss. Music to my ears. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.